Welcome to the Reuniversity Ask the AASHTO accreditation program. I'm Kim Swanson. I am the moderator today, and my day job is the communications manager at AASHTO Resource. So we're going to dive right in and meet the senior team with the AASHTO accreditation program, and I will let them introduce themselves. Welcome, everybody.
Hey, thanks, Kim. I'm Brian Johnson. I'm the manager of the AASHTO accreditation program. Also co-host the AASHTO Resource Q&A podcast with Kim. And this will be very much like a live version of the podcast today, I think, because we have just a few attendees right now and it should be pretty open. So thanks for attending. And I'll pass it over to Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy Reed. I'm the Associate Program Manager for the accreditation program. And yeah, I'm excited, even though we have a small group today. Hopefully that makes it a lot easier for some useful conversations and questions. And then Joe.
Hi, I'm Joe Williams, a Senior Quality Analyst with the accreditation program. I've been with this arm of AASHTO Resource for going on about 7 years now, and I'm looking forward to having a conversation and answering any questions that everybody may have. Pete?
Yeah, hey, hi, I'm Pete. I've been with AASHTO not as long as Brian, longer than Joe, and may have worked with you. I recognize Keyshore's name. Hello, welcome. And look forward to getting to meet all of you here.
Hi, I think I'm the last one. I'm John McCabe. I'm a senior quality analyst. I've been with the app team for about 4 or 5 years now, and then with AASHTO Resource as an assessor since 2012. Looking forward to some questions this afternoon.
Yes, thank you all for joining us. This webinar is being recorded. So just if you do ask a question for some of the attendees, it is recorded. So there's that. Again, thank you all for being here. And does anyone have a question right off the bat? You can, I think, raise your hand for if you're an attendee, and I can unmute you, or you can type it into the Q&A, which you'll see at the bottom, or the chat, and I'll read it off. If you're not quite comfortable being unmuted and talking, feel free to pop in a question. Maybe I ask a question of the attendees. Is everyone here accredited, or is there somebody new that is not familiar with the accreditation process? Perhaps we can start there. But I do see some of these names are familiar to me anyway. So I assume that they are all, most of you are accredited. Most of the attendees are work for accredited laboratories. So does anyone have a specific question that we want to dive into? I'll let you think on that a little bit more. Brian, is there anything that you want to share that's like new and happening with the AASHTO accreditation program that might be of interest to the attendees as they think about what questions to ask you?
Anything new? Not really. I have gotten questions though, because some people knew that there was an R18 ballot that went out through the AASHTO Committee on Materials and Pavements. And there's enough to talk about with that one that I think we're going to have a separate podcast episode, but I will let people know that it takes a long time to get standards updated in AASHTO. They only happen once per year. So this particular ballot went out in 3 stages. There was a larger ballot. That one didn't pass because it received a few negatives. And then there were 2 other elements of it that did pass. One of them was related to the frequency for calibration or standardization of the compression machines to get it to match what it says in ASTM E4, which says that the intervals should be 12 months, but it can go as far as 18 months. So that will be updated in the 2023 book for AASHTO or volume of standards. And the other change was an equipment table for steel testing that will be new in 2023. And then what I received back from the committee are comments and negatives on the rest of it. And So that's not going to go out. Like I'll have to put another ballot together and get it to go back out. So long answer there, but at least you know a little bit about what's coming. And we will send information out so that people can prepare for the changes when that gets closer. But we're quite a ways off from that right now.
Well, thanks for the update there. We do have a couple more people popping on, so I just wanted to let all the new attendees know that we are a small group today. So if you have a question, you can just raise your hand electronically and I can unmute you and you can ask your question, or you can use the Q&A feature and type it in and I'll read it out for everybody. So either way, this is going to be a really short webinar if nobody raises their hand. So are you raising your hand, Brian?
I am raising my hand. I have a question. So I got this the other day from somebody just to kind of help facilitate the discussion. One question I had from someone, and this is for any quality analyst who wants to answer it, is how do you prioritize your workload?
I mean, I'll start with that one. It is tricky because what a lot of people don't realize is that, you know, we're not just working with the labs all the time. Each quality analyst kind of has separate projects within our organization that they work on. For instance, I'm involved with some ASCM standards that I take over and work on. I'm also involved with another group called TFASH, which is a harmonization effort between AASHTO and ASCM for asphalt standards. So when you say prioritize workload, it's not just what the actual role of the quality analyst is. It's, you know, other extracurriculars as well. I'd say the first thing, just in a daily, you know, open the computer and get to work. You know, the first priority is emails and voicemails, see what's come in since the afternoon before. After that, we have rush files, which are typically laboratories that are seeking accreditation. We'll check on those to see if any of those have responded to any findings that they might have had or report. And then after that, there's two ways of looking at it. Either we look at files that have deadlines that are coming up soon, or Pete actually has done some really cool coding, and he sends us a list once a week of all of the files that we have, and we can actually see how long files have been waiting on a response for us. So if a file from a laboratory isn't due in a month and a half, but they submitted responses a week ago, we can see that they're waiting on us, so we can go ahead and check on them. So there's a couple different ways we can do that, and you just really have to schedule your time with doing that, working with the laboratories, and also with doing your extracurriculars as well.
Thank you for that insight, Joe. Does anyone have a different style of prioritizing that they want to share, or is that basically it? Joe covered it all.
Yeah, I would say Joe just covered it all. I mean, I was just gone for 3 days doing an assessment, and today was my very first day back, and that's basically how I organized my work today. I was going through emails. After the emails were done, I did the little bit of stuff I need to do to turn in my assessment. After that was done, start knocking away at some files and see how much I can get done. And hopefully by next week, I'll nice and caught up. But yeah, I mean, that's one of the things. I mean, we're always going to prioritize the rush files. I'm going to prioritize phone calls and emails, because a lot of times those phone calls and emails have something to do with a report that's already waiting for me. So you can kind of kill two birds with one stone there. And then you kind of just keep on going down.
Thanks, John. Pete, Amy, anything to add? Or maybe I should throw that question to Brian, see how Brian prioritizes his workload.
No one wants to know that one.
I mean, yeah, emails and phone calls. I have labs waiting on me for a long time. I get involved in, Joe mentioned some coding activities, and so if a lab needs me for anything, sending me an email or calling me is the best way. And you know, I'm kind of curious. I don't want to turn this into something that shouldn't be, but for the people attending, if anyone has any, a couple things. New, I like when we add new test methods to our programs, and so curious if anyone in the areas where they're living, if they'd like to see any new test methods added to our program. A lot of times we don't add new test methods until we get enough customers asking for them. And so interested in that. I like to learn new things. So getting exposed to new test methods is fun for me. And also, the proficiency sample program, the assessment program, those services we offer feed into the accreditation program. And so some of what they do is to cater to our needs. And so I'm kind of curious if there are any services we're currently offering that you'd like to see improved in any way, or if we're doing something that you think is not effective and you'd like to see it done a different way. I'm kind of curious if anyone has any suggestions there.
I love that train of thought there, Pete. And I will encourage anyone to just raise their hand if they don't want to type it in, any of the attendees. We are a small group here today, so you can either type in your suggestions into the chat or use the Q&A, or just raise your hand and I can unmute you. Because again, we're a smaller group today, so I don't want people to feel a little overwhelmed of talking in front of a lot of people, because it won't be a lot of people. In full transparency, I think there's about 10 guests or 9 attendees. So in addition to us, so if that eases anyone's apprehension perhaps about getting that, because that was a great question, Pete. We'd love to hear feedback from people like that. So, we have a first person. I'm going to allow you to talk. So with your hand raised so politely. So welcome. If you want to introduce yourself and then let us know what you have to say.
Good afternoon. I'm Qais El Hayek from Geostructures. So I have some question because we just did run accreditation for our lab. So it's my first time to work on this accreditation, and I was a bit confused and had some question about why we should do this, why we shouldn't do that, how things work for the accreditation. This two separate procedure, or for me it's separate, because the PSP, the proficiency sample, and the evaluation or the assessment. Why they are separate? Why we're running assessment for lab technician if we have this PSP evaluation for the lab? What's the purpose of sending someone to the lab and check on the performance if because usually you don't know if we are bringing someone else to do this test or not. I don't know what's the purpose, the exact purpose of doing. I understand that you need to evaluate how we run this test, for at least for the first time, when we request first time accreditation for adding a new test method. But if we were doing this test for like 10 years or more, what's the purpose of keep running on-site or remote assessment for the same test method?
All right.
Yeah,
I think we can answer that one. So first of all, the assessment, the accreditation process is about conformance to the quality management system requirements and the test methods. So when we go in there, we're doing more than just watching one person run a test. We're making sure that over time, you're implementing your quality management system policies and procedures, keeping up with equipment calibrations, keeping up with training new staff, keeping up with evaluations and competency of staff over time, internal audits, management reviews, all of these other things that lead to conformance to AASHTO R18, ASTM C1077, and all of the other standards, E329, that's an ASTM standard as well. So that's, we have to come back repeatedly to make sure that you're still in conformance, your laboratory is still in conformance. Now that proficiency sample result is another way we monitor, and it does provide some objective determination of how well your laboratory is testing relative to other laboratories that are performing the same test. But it's a lot, it can be an indicator that things are going well. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're implementing your quality management system, though. So that it's a monitoring tool that's used by an accreditation program, but without the assessment and digging into the details of the adherence to the requirements, it's hard for an accreditation program to declare that that laboratory is in conformance. If that helps, does anybody else want to add anything to that on the call?
I can add to that. When you were first asking your question, one of the things that came up for me was you said, I believe that you can just kind of bring someone else in to run the testing for you. And that's something that we really focus on the accreditation side. It's required in the app procedures manual that the people that perform testing during your assessment are the staff that are at your laboratory all the time. So it is a requirement. We get a lot better idea that they really are staff at your facility by being there, ideally in person, having conversations with your staff when they're performing the test. And, you know, it actually has came up before when someone's like, oh yeah, I'm not from this area. I came in to run testing, and that's not what we want. So having those in-person conversations is a really good tool for us as an accreditation program to make sure that the people running the test are the people that actually work at that facility. Because again, you could send your sample somewhere too. Sorry about that. And then, sorry about that. In addition to that, I lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. I don't know if anyone else has anything else to add, but yeah, one of the biggest things is just making sure that the staff that are at your laboratory are really the staff that's performing testing. And then the other thing I did think of, and then I'll let it go to you, Pete, is that when you're running tests for us, you know, maybe you're close to meeting, but there's a couple small things that could give you even better results with your testing. And that might not be something that you even worry about if you're getting 3s and 4s on your proficiency sample scores. But by having someone in there pointing out the small details to you that could be changed, it might help you guys start getting 4s and 5s on your proficiency samples instead, and a lot, you know, better results to your customers. Go ahead, Pete.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so as I told you, it was my first inspection assessment that I do ever. So what I saw, I don't know if the people that doing the assessment, they are just working with checklist. I think that's at least this point, it should be weird for me or for anyone that have been doing lab for several years to see someone who doesn't know the test, doesn't know how to, don't know how to to run the test, and he has only this checklist. Okay, he did this? Okay, he did that? Okay. For me, if you want to just check and see if the lab has updated all this quality management system, it's all of this stuff, it's kind of paper, so we can just email it or upload it on the platform, and you may review it. I don't know, I'm just trying to understand this concept of, okay, you said, okay, I can send it out to sample and get it back, but for labs that has like 10 years, it should be at certain time, you may first time run the accreditation inside assessment, like 18 months or 24 months. Then next time it should be much longer. It shouldn't be at the same interval. It should be next time we give you more room, like maybe to 3 years, then 5 years. You can keep reviewing our paper, training records, calibration records, all this stuff, you can do it. But doing the on-site assessment, I'm not talking about sending someone to do maybe a check on our equipment. That's okay. I'm talking about being next to us, ask us to perform the test step by step, and we have like 30 test methods that needs to be performed and preparation. I don't know if you see how much time we spend to prepare the lab, to prepare the sample, to prepare the equipment, stop all the work that we have for the lab, and empty the lab and prepare the stuff only to do this assessment.
Yeah, so I think we understand the vein of that question, and I see that John McCabe, did you want to address that? Because I know that there's numerous people on here that can help kind of walk through, because it is a very it's a different accreditation process than some of the other international ones, and it is for a reason, and we would like to share that of some of the background on that. John, did you want to take?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, a lot of the reasons why we do that is because even somebody that's been running the testing for 10 years, you can get into bad habits over time, or you start getting shortcuts. Or one of the biggest things is the standard may change, the requirements may change. We're checking different kinds of equipment out there. There's a lot of different things that can happen over time during the assessment. So, I mean, this is just a double check to make sure that you are meeting all the necessary requirements. Because, I mean, I have seen it when I was an assessor. Somebody's been doing something for 25 years, and then, you know, over time, you know, you start learning something different, or you start maybe writing like a state method instead of the actual ASTM or AASHTO standard, and so you're writing it wrong. You're getting a couple of different results. So the whole point of this program is to make sure that everybody across the entire country is running the standards exactly the way that they're meant to be. So all the results that they're getting are going to meet all the necessary specifications. So, you know, if this laboratory gets a big tax dollar job or something on a federal highway project, you know, it's make sure that everybody's on the same page, everybody's doing the testing the same way. That's always the big part of our program and why we come back every 2 years to do this.
Thank you for that explanation, John. Pete,
Thank you.
Does that make a little bit more sense for you? Did that answer? It is a very complicated process.
Yeah.
It can be overwhelming, especially when you're new to the program. So I can appreciate that as well. And nobody really loves having somebody watch them do their work. I know I don't like that either. So I definitely can appreciate that. But did that answer most of your questions? Perfect. Thank you. And we do have a question popping up in the Q&A. So I am going to read that just a moment as I get it closer to my eyeballs. Is Resource considering adding non-destructive testing to scope of accreditation identified in E329, specifically welded connections to structural steel and liquid pertinent and magnetic particles. Thank you. I wasn't going to do it justice. Thank you for that question. And who would like to answer that? Brian,
I think I should probably take that one. Yeah. So we have talked about adding NDT and other special inspection aspects to our program over the years. And there was some interest and then there wasn't. And I think if that's something that you would think we could bring value to the industry, I would suggest emailing me or Kim or Tracy and let us know that you're interested in that. Because like we won't add anything unless there's a lot of interest. And I think something that is generally done in the field, we really would have to have a lot of interest to add that. I mean, we have, you know, concrete field and some soil field tests and SFRM testing that's done in the field, but the majority of the program is covering the lab testing. So if you're interested, please feel free to email us and we'll start looking into that one. Thanks, Kishore. Oh, you're muted, Kim.
I did. Thank you for that.
Rookie mistake.
I know it's like the first time I've done this or something. I forgot that the panelists could see, so I didn't have to read and try to read live that question and mispronounce all of the words. So we do have a question from Adam. And since everyone can read that question, would someone like to read it and then answer it?
I'll read it, but it's somebody
Okay.
else can answer because I don't want to
Good.
dominate it.
I appreciate that.
This is from Adam Walburn. Our company has struggled, along with many in the industry at times, with not necessarily performing surveillance, but tracking them and performing at specified intervals. Do you have any suggestions, or are you willing to share some good practices that you've seen that have worked in tracking surveillances and performing them at required intervals? Okay, Adam, I'd like to ask you a follow-up question just for clarification. When you're talking about surveillance, are you talking about competency evaluations for testing technicians?
Adam, if you raise your hand.
Yes. Okay, that's what I thought you meant.
I was going to say, if you raise your hand, Adam, you can ask that question yourself, but we'll have one of these.
Okay,
very
I'll
qualified.
ask our student of quality management systems here, Pete Holter. He's always interested in all these different policies and procedures that he reads from everybody, and he catalogs them in his brain. Pete, have you seen anything where somebody is found it to work particularly well for keeping up with competency evaluations?
Wow, I haven't really seen like how labs are tracking them to make sure they're getting performed at the required intervals and what type of software they're using to make sure that happens. Yeah, and I'm sorry, I don't really know what people are using there.
Okay.
A lot of responses we get from labs say an Outlook calendar reminder for this or that equipment related activity, and same thing with comp evals. But apart from that, I'm not really sure. But I'll also say, in connection with the question about intervals, is that depending on what a lab is accredited for, they can extend intervals for these evaluations out to a reasonable span of time. There's no set requirement in R18 itself for how often comp evals need to be performed, and it's suggested in there that more experienced technicians could be evaluated at a longer interval. You're going to see in D3740 and E329 specific requirements every 2 years for technicians in 3740, evaluations every 3 years in E329. And so you do have those limitations to how far out you can take that interval. But a lot of labs are under the impression that it needs to be every 12 months or every 6 months, even based on old examples that were in R18 that were given just as examples, but were taken to be requirements. And so just thought I'd clarify that.
Yeah, thanks, Pete. Hey, Joe, do you want to add anything to this? Have you seen anything work particularly well?
Something that I've seen work a little bit. It was a couple of years ago, and it kind of became putting the pressure on the actual technicians and giving some of the responsibility to them and giving some of that delegation to them, saying, hey, we need to evaluate you for these tests. Make sure we're doing that. Usually putting them on a monthly, we need to do you in March. We need to evaluate you in March. Make sure we do that. Make sure you come to us. And then that kind of distributes that load a little bit to, give some of the responsibility to the technicians, and also just bring them in on the quality process as well and what they're actually doing. Another thing with that is equipment calibration, specifically for field equipment. Everybody will have their own kit, and it's their responsibility to get their own field equipment standardized and calibrated, not necessarily the responsibility of the supervisor or the manager. And I think really kind of bringing the technicians in on the quality requirements and why you're actually doing this, why it's required to doing that. I think that helps out a lot.
That's an excellent point. That engagement is really important if you want an effective quality management system. I want to mention another thing. In R18, AASHTO 18, it says that the quality management system has to be available to and understood by your staff. And the best way to get that understanding is to get engagement with the technical staff in different aspects of the quality management system, including scheduling, competency evaluations, equipment checks and standardizations, and the like.
And I see Nathan has his hand up, and so I'm going to allow you to talk, Nathan, as well. So I don't know if you have some suggestions on this or a new question. Either is fine. So welcome, Nathan.
Can you hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Oh, okay. I had a question about internal audits, and my question is, I've been involved in a few, buyouts and, seen how different places perform things. And I've seen some lab internal audits that have been like 1 page, check, 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 check. And then I've seen them that are 6 pages, and then I've seen them with corrective actions. And I'm wondering, like, in general, when you look at something, do you just look for the 1 page cover checklist, or do you really look for the entire all the way through the closeout, or what I call it, is like, okay, you've satisfied your internal audit findings. I think it seems to be maybe applied differently from office to office, or that's just kind of a general statement. That could be wrong of me, but I'm just throwing that out there. What have y'all looked into, like a certain set of like standardization of what you look for, or is 1 page good enough as long as it meets the requirements outlined in the quality standards? That's it.
Thank you, Nathan. Amy, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So we're continually improving our training process here, and there's always room for improvement. So there is a variation sometimes between an assessment at one lab and another lab, within the same company or within the same town. Something may be accepted at one location and not at another. And there's various reasons for that. One thing could be that, maybe the assessor was in a rush. It was close to that deadline. They didn't get everything reviewed. Sometimes, we're not there on site to see what's reviewed as the accreditation program. So what a laboratory then submits to us and says, hey, this was accepted somewhere else. If we weren't on site, we don't know what was accepted and what wasn't. From our point of view, though, as an accreditation program, we definitely want more than 1 page. We want your entire quality management system reviewed. We want actual documentation of all the documents that are reviewed throughout that internal audit. And we want some kind of closure. So, you're reviewing your proficiency sample results and you see that, oh, you guys have been getting low scores the last 2 years and no one's been performing corrective actions on those. And so they're continuing to happen. And now your laboratory is suspended for it. We want to make sure through that internal audit process that you follow up on it, all of those sorts of things, just to make sure that the process, is effective. Internal audits can take a lot of time. They may take several days at your laboratory for someone to conduct it, but that's good. The point is that your laboratory is growing through this process. It's not that you're just filling a piece of paper out once a year and putting some check marks on there. And that is something that quality analysts are going to send back to the lab if everything is greenlit, good to go. And then you have a report with lots of nonconformities and the things are still unresolved, because it means that you guys just didn't dig deep enough on your internal audit.
Thank you for that, Amy. Mm-hmm. And I will also say we do have a lot of resources on internal audits on our website in the Re-University section. There's a newsletter article, Internal Auditing, Just the Facts, Ma'am. We've done a bunch of podcast episodes about internal audits as well. But did that answer your question, Nathan? I did mute you, so you'll have to unmute if you want it. But did that answer it for the most part, or do you need more clarification? I will say that that is all good. Did you have anything else to add, Brian, on that topic?
I did. I back to what Pete was mentioning about where sometimes the examples didn't really help out too much. I think this is a case where the R18 example sent people down the wrong path. And there's an oversimplified example of an internal audit record, and it's really insufficient. I mean, if you want to have an effective internal audit, it should definitely be more than 1 page. I don't see how you could do a really good one that actually leads you to a quality improvement by just sticking to that. There's not enough room to write down what you need to write down. And it's just I'd say inadequate. So I think that there's also, this is an area of improvement, I'd say, across the board for people in our industry, is getting a little bit better at internal auditing. One of the requirements in R18 says that they should train the internal auditor, where I think it says where possible, or if possible, or something like that. And it's possible to do it. And if you want to do it right, you really should do it. So like Kim mentioned, we have some materials available. So if you don't have somebody at your company who can train you on internal audits, there are ways to get training on internal auditing. I'd say at a minimum, we have some free resources to people, but there are also plenty of organizations that offer training on internal auditing. And I would say, if you really just want to have an idea for it or feel for it, just pay attention to the assessor performing the external audit, because really your internal audit should be similar to an external audit, except you know more about what's going on. So where an external auditor is going to cover some stuff, an internal auditor should really be digging in and doing such a good job that when you have that external audit, it shouldn't really reveal any news to you. So I'd say that's a quick way to know if your internal audits are effective, is if you didn't get any surprises during your external audit.
And go ahead, Nathan.
I was going to say that answers my question. I couldn't figure out where the unmute button was on Zoom. So
That's okay. I threw you for a curveball and muted you without actually telling you. So I did post some links in the chat to some podcast episodes about internal audits if you're interested about that. So if anybody else wants more information on that, we do have a lot of resources available. Does anyone else have any questions for attendees? I don't see any other hands raised or nothing coming through. Oh, Pete, you got a question. You're always good for a question, Pete.
Hey, Kim, thanks. Going back, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but Guy, back to what you were saying at the beginning about how we don't know who's performing the proficiency sample programs because it's not connected with the on-site assessment. And yeah, that's a problem. I mean, it's kind of a trust factor. We just have to trust that the labs are being honest about who's performing those tests and where they're being performed, what equipment's being used. But that's a good point. That'd be, I think, kind of hard for us to manage the logistics of doing that, all of the applicable PSPs during an assessment, and it would be more expensive, but that would be a better way to somehow have them better connected, those two activities. We currently only connect them if a lab gets revoked for low ratings in proficiency sample programs. We do end up sending them a blind sample and require that they test them while we're there observing them perform those tests. So just to come back to that, it's a good idea. And I'd also, the interval for on-site assessments, some of that is we're kind of held to what the state departments of transportation want us to do, and they want us to come out, as often as we do. We have, though, in terms of your quality management system documentation, I'm not sure what our assessment program is doing now, but I know when I first started, every assessment we reviewed the entire QMS. And then we got to a point where it was every other assessment we would review the entire QMS, but we did a truncated review every other assessment. I'm not sure if that every other assessment truncation is still in place, but that was something that was going on for a while. And but yeah, in terms of, if you've been in the program for 10 years, same equipment, same technicians, can't we get, a longer interval between surveillance activities? And that's a good point. It falls in line with our thinking on comp evals and how often they need to be performed for testing technicians. And, maybe we could take a broader look at a similar practice being applied to our assessment program requirements for intervals. But I don't know. This is something to think about. So thank you for that.
Yeah, we're always looking for continual improvement opportunities. So Amy, what did you want to chime in with?
Yeah, I thought Pete's thought process was very interesting on maybe considering in the future different intervals. But something that immediately came to mind for me is there is a lot of turnover in this industry. So even though a laboratory may be credited for 10 years or 15 years, or the technical manager has been in the industry for 35 years, there's a lot of turnover on the technician and supervisory level. And that's something we want to be aware of. And we want to go in periodically and do those checks.
That's a great point too. Thank you there, Amy. We did get another question from Jeff, talking of training, and I think I can actually answer this one. I'm excited. Now, if I only answer it correctly is the question. But the question Jeff asks, speaking of training, do you know when the full agenda for the March 2023 AASHTO Resource Technical Exchange will be posted? And I will say, pretty soon is the answer to that. Registration is scheduled to be open in December, maybe even earlier, fingers crossed, but don't quote me on that. And we will at least have a rough agenda of what sessions will be when. It may not include the full description of each session, but we will definitely have something so everyone can know what to expect. But we do have a good agenda. I'm excited about the agenda. And I think a lot of the people you see here you will also see at the technical exchange. So Jeff, that is the answer to the question, soon. And obviously more details soon, but to come out hopefully next week, maybe in December though. So yeah, be on the lookout for that. And we hope to see you at the technical exchange in Fort Worth. So thank you for that. Anybody have any other questions? We are nearing the end of our allotted time, but I do want to make sure that we answer all of the questions for the people that were able to join us today. Any questions? Raise your hand. Type it in. All right, we still have a couple minutes, but seeing no super excited people raising their hand right now, does anyone on our panel have anything that they want to share before we close this out?
Yeah, I wanted to ask the panelists a question just about what kind of common questions are you getting or comments from the laboratories you're working with? Are you seeing any trends or themes that might be interesting for the attendees to hear about? Let's go, Joe. I haven't heard from you in a little bit.
You didn't give me time to think about it. It would have been nice if this was a predetermined question. None that I can think of. I'd say it's something else that I do is I do a lot of the PSP documentation that we do for requirements of participation. So something to keep an eye out for is the VEAM program is being split out into 3 different programs based on the method of compaction, whether it's the Texas compaction, Colorado compaction, or the typical California kneading compactor that we see. So if your laboratory is accredited for one or more of those standards, you want to keep an eye out for that. The emulsified asphalt program is being split out into 2 different ones for unmodified and polymer modified. So keep an eye out for those changes in 2023. Those will be coming. And yeah, just one more thing before we sign off, just a plug for our website in general. You can see Kim has been posting a lot of this stuff in this chat. You know, she doesn't keep these documents locked away in her back pocket somewhere. All of that's available on our website on the Re-University page. A lot of different policy and guidance documents. There's a different the newsletter, that's the word I'm looking for, newsletter articles that can be referenced for all sorts of different kind of things. So yeah, our website isn't just for reviewing your laboratories accreditation or where you stand and for submitting responses, there's a lot of good information on there to take a look at.
Thank you for that plug, Joe. And I will say if you want more details about the changes to the Veeam samples that Joe was talking about, I did just post a link to the announcement that was on our website about that. That has a little more details. We also have a podcast, but I was not quick enough to get that link out right now. So, so there's that. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add? Any of the panelists? Any other questions that you get a lot that you think our attendees would love to hear?
I'd say one thing. I know Brian had asked us about something that we get like a lot of times. I know, so just like responding to the nonconformities in your OSA report, I always know a big one that a lot of customers will get upset about is when, if it's a procedural finding and they submit, a corrective action report, and it's really important to know about the wording that you're using for those corrective action reports, because one of the biggest things that we see is past tense, or I'm sorry, future tense, saying the technician will be trained. And then the question I have to ask back then, has the technician been retrained? And then a lot of times the laboratories will get upset by that, like, well, I already said that they were retrained. As well, unfortunately, in the corrective action report, it said that they will be retrained. And in order to be able to fully resolve that, no, we need to make sure that the retrain has actually happened. So that's just always one thing I like to tell labs, is just watch out with the way that you're wording things. If you're going to use future tense, like that something will be done, then we're going to have to ask, well, has it been done? It's something very small, but it will save a lot of time though in the long run.
Thank you for that, John. Amy?
Yeah, so something I come across a lot, usually people call me when they're worried or concerned. And one of the big things is certifications, because they're like, my certification expired for my technician and they can't get into a course for 3 or 4 months. We work with labs as much as possible when you give us confirmations and things like that for an upcoming certification. But it's really important to remember that it takes several months typically from when you schedule or you start the process of trying to schedule a certification until it's taken and your certification is received. And the expectation is that your certifications for your staff, technicians, and supervisors are current at all the time. So if there's a certification that's expiring in 4 or 5 months, that's the time you should be signing your staff up for new certifications. You shouldn't wait until it's expired and then start the process, because then you have staff members that you would like to perform testing for projects that require those ASTM quality management system standards that require certifications. And if your staff aren't certified, it's a very kind of stressful situation for everyone. So just keeping those current, realizing that certifications do sometimes take 4 or 5 months from when you start looking for one until you can actually receive your certification.
That's a great tip. Thank you, Amy. Anything else for the good? We have a couple. I just want to put up everyone's contact information and things like that. But is there anything else you want to partake or partake? I don't know if that's what the correct term of that is.
I'll partake for a second here.
Thanks.
One thing I think people get frustrated by as well that I wanted to let people know about is sometimes they'll call and someone won't answer the phone when they call, and then they don't get a call back, and that can be frustrating. But a lot of times when we look into it, we find that person didn't leave a message. So we'll get a complaint or negative feedback about, hey, I called and no one answered, or no one ever answers the phone. And, there's a couple things that could be going on. One thing is we are in the Eastern time zone and our hours are typically 7 to 3 is pretty common. But we do have some variability. Like Pete has the night shift almost. He has a little later hours. But anytime you don't get it, well, we also have a lot of meetings, and like right now we're on a webinar, and somebody may be trying to get a hold of one of the people on this webinar right now, and they're not, and then they hang up. But unless you leave a message, you will not get a call back. As you know, you get a lot of spam calls these days, and phishing and other things, and political calls and stuff that you don't want to answer the phone for, right? So we don't know that it's you unless you leave a message. And I usually, when somebody calls me and they don't leave a message, I assume they must have called one of the other people on the team and got a hold of who they needed to. So I won't go and look at all my missed calls and call people back. So if you do need to get a hold of anybody, the phone is a great way to do it. That shows a sense of urgency, but make sure you leave a message with details too. Your name, where what company you work for, city and state, because there might be multiple locations, and your callback phone number.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for that, Brian. And I do have the contact us page up for the AASHTO accreditation program. So these are all the quality analysts and senior staff. So it's not just the people here today. So if you have your quality analyst, there's the number for that, and you can find that on our website. But yeah, it's amazing how many times people forget that little part of actually having to leave the message, or leave the message with the appropriate information. I know I'll get some calls like, call me back. And I'm like, about what? I'd like to be prepared. So I can definitely do that. So thank you everybody for your time today. That's the contact information. If you want to connect with us, you can do that. Again, phone calls, emails are great, but you can find us on where you find your podcasts, on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, all of those fun things. So be sure to message that. My contact information is also on the website, just not there. But you can give me an email at kswanson@ashtoresource.org, or give me a call at 240-436-4807. That was putting me on the spot there, remembering my own phone number. So you can call me there if you want. Again, my information is on the website as well. So here's a bunch of ways to contact us, and already teased, I believe, is our technical exchange coming up in March. So hopefully we will see you all there. And is there anything else from our panelists today? All right.
Yeah, just thanks for attending. We're happy to have you. Anytime you have questions, let us know. We love to be able to share whatever information we can to help you.
Yep. Thank you. And I will be sending a recording of this out. So if you did ask a question and you didn't catch the full answer, I will be sending a recording out, and it will likely be posted on our website as well. And you may hear this audio as a podcast episode as well. And by may, I mean you likely will. So thank you very much to our panelists and to our attendees. I'm glad we could have this hour with you. So have a good day, everyone.